Richard. Yeah. So I'm Partha. I'm global product at Shape Security. Quick overview about F5 and Shape. F5 got acquired Shape about a year back for $1 billion. F5 is a global leader in a multi-cloud application services providing digital transformations for large enterprises. And Shape is a leading provider of fraud and abuse prevention solution, leading user of AI and ML machine learning technologies to prevent fraud. Are you able to see this? I'm seeing resume share. I don't know if you're able to see my screen.
Still working so far, yep.
Okay, I don't know why it's not seeing. From my side, it does seem like it is seen, but okay, let me try it differently.
Try a reshare.
Does this help?
I think so, yeah. Carry on. I'll let you know if anything stops again.
Okay, so but this works, right? You're able to see now?
Yep, can see that.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Yeah, that's an overview about F5 and Shape. Shape currently defends large enterprises, Global 2000. On a daily basis, we mitigate about 1 billion automated attacks. We protect monthly active users, about a billion monthly active users. 82 patients in a patents issued, 77 additional patents pending. Essentially, you can see the list of clients and network effect that that Shape is able to see across the solution. One of the key themes that we're going to talk about from our point of view, how the future of fraud should look like, is evolving, is stopping fraud at the front door using a cross-functional convergent platform. I'm going to talk about what this means, right? We know in a digital-first world, you know this pandemic has just accelerated the whole thing. People are forced to stay at home. They're used to do grocery, to purchases, to banking, to everything. Even customers who wouldn't have traditionally tried digital means are now forced to do that. The effect that is having on digital adoption is this. What is expected to be the adoption of digital solutions or digital applications or digital economy is what is expected to be 5 years down the line is going to be happening now, even after the COVID settles down and vaccinations are through and people have got back to normal life. It has just fast-tracked the whole thing by at least 2 years, by estimates say at least by 2 years, as much as 5 years. So that's a new reality that we're going to be living in, right? And it is not new for enterprises. Enterprises already know that digital first strategy is part of the key enterprise strategy. Data from IDC between 2019 and 2025 worldwide, digital transformation spend is about $3.3 trillion, right? It is essentially automating and digitizing and transforming the businesses around the digital ecosystem to be ready for the future. 87% of the companies actually are doing this because they think their industry is going to be disrupted. Fintech, you see, is a classic example where a lot of fintechs coming in. The lending from fintechs is actually as much or higher than what the banks do. So that it is disrupting markets. It is disrupting markets. And 50% of the customers actually are focusing on this because they want to improve customer experience and they think it is key to digital transformation, right? So organizations and enterprises are already on this journey. Nobody was anticipating what's going, the impact of a pandemic, like the pandemic would come. But what is it is caught organizations off guard, right? And they know that customer experience is the key competitor differentiator. If you see the brands on the left-hand side, that's what a lot of the customer experience are used to when they use Netflix, Amazon, shopping, etc. But when they come and go to their other go-to retail applications or banking applications, etc., they don't see the same level of experience. They're used to a very good user experience from Google and the likes of Google, Amazon, etc., and they don't see that, and therefore they're likely to go to any competitor who are going to be providing that user experience. On top of that, what you say is that a lot of data breaches. So you have a heightened volume of data coming through the digital means, and fraudsters are using this high digital activity, and it's going to be the trend of the future to actually do more and more fraud activity using a lot of previously compromised data breaches. And of course, there is data breaches happening even now. So they're using a lot of stolen data breaches, synthetic IDs, as phishing attempts, malware, etc. Different means of capturing data, right? A classic example of this is what you see in fraud losses from unemployment, US unemployment, right? The digital chaos is ripe for the fraudsters. It is estimated that the fraud loss as of now from US unemployment fraud is $36 billion. It is expected to go even higher. And in UK, it's expected to be about 3 to 6 billion pounds, right? So there's a lot of organizations are taking the path of digital transformation. Pandemic has put everything on a fast track. Chaos is ripe for the pandemic, and organizations who are not ready to address digital transformation and have enough fraud prevention solution in place are getting beat up. You can see an example here is how government organizations are getting beat up in terms of unemployment fraud. This is because its government numbers are coming out, but private companies choose to keep this losses, private and confidential, right? So that's what is happening in the industry. And what we see seeing in the industry, there's a series of automated attacks with all the stolen information. This is what we see is a lot of credential stuffing and automated attacks across all industries. We see it's anywhere between 60% to as much as 99% here, as you can see here, and that is the first line of attack with all the stolen information. Even if they get a 1% success rate, that's enough of an account for them to exploit. Once they got access to the account, it's a very normal attack cycle. User stolen credentials, data breaches, phishing, key loggers, etc. User stolen credentials, automated attacks, whatever you get access to, go forward with the access to the account. Even those that you don't have access, there's a lot of fingerprinting and identity solutions and device ID solutions in the market, but there are also in the dark web solutions available that actually in the black market fraudsters trade openly. They collaborate with each other more than we do, honestly, right? They collaborate with each other and they give digital identities that it is possible to fake, right? That is what is happening. We see a lot of that happening in the market. The important thing is to counter this, a digital fingerprinting solution or a digital fraud solution need to have a very good anti-spoof technology to be able to counter these measures, right? That's one of the critical part of actually solving this digital fraud solutions, right? Once the fraudsters get access to the accounts are compromised. You see a lot of account takeover fraud, one of the biggest fraud takeovers, along with the new application fraud, as in case with the government unemployment claims, etc. That leads to more fraud and also friction, because what organizations are doing is to stop fraud, they're introducing a lot of friction. A case in point here is essentially, they're introducing a lot of friction. Example is a lot of multi-factor authentication that is being imposed to prevent fraud. It is unproven that how much of that is actually helping stop fraud. I will later show down the statistics on how MFAs may not be the right approach, and it needs to be done in a much more smarter way. So what we are seeing in the market across all the enterprises, or at least most of the enterprises, is fraudsters are organized. They don't have boundaries. They attack on the digital front end, while our defenses are siloed, right? Security is actually focused around web application and firewall protection, bot detection, maybe API and application security, mitigating DDoS attacks, etc. The intelligence of that is not necessarily passed on to risk department, who are essentially responsible for the fraud loss that include both the first-party fraud loss and the third-party fraud loss. Basically, that is the bust outs and the synthetic ID-related fraud, right? That's the first-party fraud, right? They're using their own in-house point solutions to be able to solve this. Account takeover, social engineering attempts, data breaches, etc. Right? More sophisticated attacks. While all these solutions or point solutions are being deployed across security and risk, there is a consequence to the business. Business is concerned about removing friction. They know the impact of having a good user experience is critical to growing the business. You saw in the previous slide that I shared, more than 50% of the customers are doing this because they want to provide a good customer digital experience, and they want to make the customers happy. Customer satisfaction is one of the key measures, and more than 50% of the enterprises who are on the digital transformation journey are focusing on that. And that has been the focus of the business, essentially providing a good customer experience, grow the business, make them sticky and loyal customers, and have them come back and again and spend more and be engaged with them primarily, right? However, we see businesses are annoyed about frictions that is being imposed. Here is an example where one of the financial services institution, before we came on board, we noticed that if you see about 90% of the MFAs that is being triggered, about 95% of the MFAs being triggered, it is being successfully passed on by the customers. So a vast majority of them are legitimate users. So it's like me getting an MFA, I pass it on, and I go on and do my activity actually, and then I'm being imposed unnecessary friction. It's actually it happens to me on a daily basis within one of the financial services that I work on a daily basis, right? This is for another financial institution, and this is nuisance friction, or this is unnecessary friction. Customers don't have to go through this, right? And this is largely driven by the fear of fraud, the fear of security related breaches on the account, right? But it is impacting business. Let's see how that's happening. Where when we come online, it is possible to get smarter about, reducing friction as well. Our view is that the customers who have legitimate customers who go through this unnecessary friction should be less than 10%. That is how, ideal world MFA should operate. And our perception is MFA succeeds only when it fails. That is the true power of MFA. Otherwise, it's just unnecessary friction. Okay, so we have talked about the problems that we're having, and the challenges in enterprising, working in silos to solve the problem. But the bottom line is fraudsters have no rules. So we know that how critical AI and machine learning solutions are important to detect and prevent fraud. AI and machine learning is not new in the fraud prevention market. It has been there. I remember working in the space for over 15 years back in the credit card fraud detection space. However, one of the key critical part of AI and machine learning solution, including Shape, we use a lot of AI and machine learning solutions to help detect fraud. One of the key ingredients is good data. One of the previous slide I shared about how in the Genesis market, a lot of digital fingerprinting is available for sale. The technology, anti-spoof technology, to be able to detect these browsers and web application interrogation and find this is actually the differentiate between the users and the fraudsters, and finding the fraudsters who are trying to lie about themselves is one of the critical pieces of actually fraud mitigation solution. And that goes back to the data, because machine learning is only as good as the data that feeds the machine learning. You probably know it's garbage in, garbage out. If you're feeding a lot of automated attacks into your machine learning, you're actually spending unnecessarily on device ID solutions on top of the lot of false positive problems that you have in false positives and detection rate. Case in point, this is an example that for a North American bank that we are able to do. In this specific North American bank, we have leveraged our AI and machine learning solutions to help detect fraud for the retail banking business division primarily. And the use case is essentially they were being hit quite a bit by account takeover fraud and a lot of new account fraud. A lot of them were also COVID related. They saw a spike because of they were using bank accounts as a drop account to attack other government funds to send funds. That includes both first party and third party fraud here from a new account perspective. 60% of the fraudulent were about account takeover, right? They had existing fraud solutions in place. And as you know, existing fraud solutions are working in silos, and the intelligence that they get from preventing security incidents is not passed on to the fraud, and vice versa. And there is a broken data and intelligence link right there. When we came in line, we are actually protecting both. We are working with the security and the fraud team. This is the results that we get from the fraud strategy team, or the part of the risk management function. When we came in line, because of the technology and the AI ML solution, we are able to identify 276% fraud that is not being detected by existing solutions. So that's an additional overlay that we are able to help with them. This has helped resulted in a savings about $10 million in annual fraud loss savings for this particular bank. The point being here is the power of bringing security, fraud, and other functions in the enterprises together to solve the problem of fraud cross functions, and a digital platform that can bring all of them together to solve for the problem as a compound effect. And that is really a case here, or example of how this can actually help organizations bring the power of coming together within the enterprises, right? Another solution we normally see is fraud is being seen as cost of doing a business, particularly if you see credit card. Yeah, every year I have done this before while in my previous roles. Every year there is a specific $1 million being projected as fraud loss. Yes, this is the cost of doing business, and it's been seen that way. But fraud solutions should also be championed by business, because it's just not about fraud loss reduction. It has an impact on the business. This is one for one of our retailers. And this is a general trend that we are seeing across a lot of our retail clients, right? About when customers come in and log in their web or mobile application, about 70% of the customers don't have any friction. They're able to log in and get on, right? About 20% of them face some form of friction, but they're able to eventually successfully log in. But about 10% of the customers actually have a hard fail login, and they don't, they're not able to get past beyond that. This was a retailer, so they had an option of guest checkout. Retailers should be very happy that they even shopped with them. I think this particular case, it was a shopping season, so they didn't want to take advantage of the offer. But as you can see, there's a clear difference in conversion rates between the customers who were blocked and customers who had free access, right, or had some form of resistance. 64% conversion rate and 51% conversion rates, right? That's lost revenue. And the reason why this is being imposed is because of security and fraud related fears around it, right? And that solution cannot just go without looking at the impact of the business. So removing friction actually can have 1 to 2% top line revenue impact. That's what we are seeing in some of our client base. And therefore, fraud solutions have to collaborate with the business units. It's no longer looking at one solution that takes care of point solutions across security, fraud, digital, marketing, business units, etc. Right? Cannot be look at the problem in different ways. And fraudsters really don't care. They go through the gaps in the organization silos and point solutions that is available in the market. Bottom line, it is impacting bottom line fraud losses, and top line revenue should be one of the key themes of any digital fraud solutions primarily, right? And therefore, it is important to have that single view as the customer go up, like from sign in or even pre-sign in using DDoS attacks, etc. Logging in, doing whatever activity, searching, checking balances, etc., and looking at the transaction. It needs to look at the entire journey, looking at insights that comes not only from the post-login activity or a pre-login activity, even before that, the network layer information that you get, the application level telemetry that we get, API level, through API gateways, what is the telemetry that we get, and looking at the customer or the fraudsters to get that single view of the customer or the fraud attack in a digital risk engine. And that not only solves for risk-related problems or fraud security-related problems, but also helps in enhancing the user experience. We just looked at how enhancing customer experience actually impacts top-line revenue. So it has to be a holistic solution across different functional units. I've called 3 key pieces of it: security, risk, and business and customer experience units primarily. Right, that we think should be one of the focus areas, right? Also, another factor that I want to consider is bring to your notice is open banking, right? Different countries are at the different stages of open banking. Open banking is forcing customers, for any new digital natives that comes in, if I give them a permission that new digital lender or any service provider should have access to my financial data, it is expected to drive more fraud, right? It is expected to drive more fraud as more open banking comes in the market, right? We already see that happening here in terms of credential stuffing attacks that is coming through aggregators. Financial aggregators actually consolidate a lot of information about the customers. I use a financial aggregator myself. I find it very convenient to see all my funds sitting in different bank accounts and how much I'm spending across my credit cards, etc. Right? But financial aggregators are also a source of attacks for fraudsters because they know how much a customer is having in each bank account, etc. And therefore, it is helping them target those bank accounts or target those high profitable ROI related from a fraud perspective, high ROI related accounts. And in this chart, what you see is that there is a lot of attacks that came through the aggregator. Generally, there is about 98% success rate, but in this time period that you see that happened in roughly about a week's time, it was only 98% success rate. And this was credential stuffing attack not the normal one, but came through aggregators, right? And more and more, as you see with open banking, you're going to see a lot of this API-driven attack. So we need to be having a solution that is looking at solutions more holistically. Also, I see the way the future is going to do is banks or maybe even enterprises are not good at sharing data and intelligence to solve problem for each other. While fraudsters are collaborating a lot, fraud rings are collaborating, right? There's a dark web marketplace where you can get digital fingerprinting, right? I remember in my previous role for a leading bank, we did a lot of research trying to identify account takeover fraud and fraud rings, but because of data privacy issues, we couldn't share that with other banks, right? That is where the power of collaborative solutions comes in the marketplace, where you are managing the data privacy. You're not necessarily sharing personal information, but you're sharing the data and intelligence securely to be able to detect and identify fraud. A lot of them could be encryption, tokenization. I'm not getting into the method of how to do that. There could be different methods, and I think the industry will evolve finding those methods. But that is the power of a vendor solution that brings a collaboration in the marketplace that also sees a lot of this traffic coming through the door, right? So to sum it up, essentially, where we think the future lies and where we think, especially with solving digital fraud, primarily given that how much of a focus enterprises are put on digital front, to be able to solve the fraud problem more holistically, whether it be network application, API, identity, user behavior, etc., and solve the problem for security risk and different business units primarily. So to sum it up, essentially, we're looking at stopping the fraud at the front door that is championed by the business units and working collaboratively. We're also looking at some cross-industry collaboration that I think is going to help solve problems in the future, and how we need to be ready for more and more attacks that is expected from open banking.